The relentless drumbeat of rain against the vast, insulated glass of the lodge was the only sound that pierced the otherwise oppressive silence of the mountaintop. David Miller, 38 years old, a man whose skin was permanently etched with the high-altitude sun and the memory of fire, stood before the panoramic window, his gaze lost in the swirling gray of the Colorado sky. He was on mandated leave from the Mountain Fire and Rescue Service, a consequence of a near-fatal rock-slide incident 6 months prior that had left his left leg stubbornly uncooperative and his spirit significantly muted. His home, a sprawling, custom-built timber and stone lodge nestled high above Aspen, was less a residence and more a fortress of solitude, a place he had intended for joyful gatherings, but which now served as a gilded cage for his convalescence. The irony was a bitter taste in his mouth. He had spent nearly 2 decades battling nature's fury, only to be sidelined by a capricious shift in the earth, leaving him rich in assets, but poor in purpose. The lodge possessed all the comforts wealth could buy, from the geothermal heating humming gently beneath the reclaimed wood floors to the state-of-the-art chef's kitchen that sat unused most days, a monument to a life he was currently too listless to fully inhabit. He was, to all appearances, the master of his domain, but every amenity, every square foot of unused space, seemed to amplify the sense of emotional vacancy that had settled over him since the accident. His sole consistent company was Maria Davis, a woman of 55, hired through a high-end agency as the lodge's primary cook and general manager of domestic affairs. Maria was a study in quiet competence. Her hands, though perpetually busy, moved with a kind of economical grace, and she carried herself with a posture that spoke of a lifetime of hard work and uncomplaining resilience. She was always impeccably neat, her dark hair pulled back severely, her uniform starched and spotless, a stark contrast to the occasional splatter of flour or sauce that marked the reality of her profession. She was a culinary artist in her own right. Her dishes were complex, flavorful, and prepared with an attention to detail that David, an unfussy man used to camp rations, found both excessive and oddly comforting. Their professional arrangement was one of mutual, almost profound respect, yet it was also one of rigid, impenetrable boundaries. Maria never spoke of her life outside the lodge, offering only clipped, polite answers to direct questions about menus or supplies. David, respecting her evident desire for privacy, never pressed. He simply paid her a generous monthly salary, a sum that was multiples above the industry standard, intended both as a mark of respect for her skill and perhaps a quiet salve for his own lingering guilt over his inability to connect with the outside world. He knew she had a family. He'd seen a brief framed photo of 2 young men and an older woman tucked into her suitcase during a brief inadvertent glimpse when she first arrived, but she had quickly tucked it away, her expression hardening momentarily. This afternoon, the storm was truly spectacular. The rain wasn't just falling, it was cascading off the eaves, turning the gravel drive into a temporary stream. The interior of the lodge, usually bright with natural light, was moody and shadowed, compelling David to wander restlessly. He had just finished a session of frustrating physical therapy. His knee throbbed with a dull ache that mirrored the ache in his chest, and he was heading toward the kitchen, perhaps to ask Maria for a strong black coffee, when he noticed the peculiar sight. The massive industrial-grade kitchen was empty. The copper pots were gleaming, the stainless steel counters wiped clean, and the air smelled faintly of thyme and rosemary from the lunch she had just prepared. His own simple meal, a flawlessly grilled trout and a side of roasted asparagus, lay digesting gently in his stomach, but Maria was nowhere in sight. He checked the laundry room, the pantry, and her small, meticulously clean staff quarters adjoining the mudroom. Empty. A flicker of movement caught his eye, drawing his attention back to the outdoors, toward the service entrance near the attached garage. There, beneath a narrow aluminum awning that barely provided shelter and was currently leaking a steady drip onto the concrete pad, sat Maria. She was perched on an overturned plastic storage bin, her back to the driving rain, wearing a thin, threadbare cardigan over her uniform. She wasn't just standing there, she was eating. Her head was bowed over a small dented metal container, not one of the lodge's expensive airtight food storage boxes, but something old, personal, and well-used. She was eating slowly, deliberately, using a plastic spoon, entirely exposed to the damp, miserable chill of the mountain air. The sight was profoundly unsettling. Here, in a house of vast, empty luxury, The person who made that luxury possible was taking her midday meal like a refugee. He watched for a full 30 seconds, the confusion slowly curdling into an uncomfortable blend of concern and mild indignation. It wasn't just the rain, it was the entire posture of isolation, the deliberate choice of discomfort when 24 warm, empty chairs stood waiting inside. David pushed open the heavy utility door, the metallic thud momentarily startling Maria, who flinched, clutching her container closer to her chest like a precious secret. The rain immediately spattered onto the floor. "Maria," David said, his voice deeper and more resonant than he intended, the sound echoing unnaturally in the small space. He had to steady himself against the doorframe, a physical reminder of his vulnerability that made him feel even more awkward about the intrusion. "What in the world are you doing out here? It's pouring. You're going to catch pneumonia." Maria immediately placed the container down and stood up, moving with a practiced swiftness to block his view of the simple contents of her lunch. Her expression was a mask of polite but firm resistance, her eyes meeting his for only a fraction of a second before darting away. "Mr. Miller," she replied, her voice soft but steady, betraying no emotion. "I apologize if I caused you concern. I was just taking a brief break. I much prefer the fresh air when I eat." She gestured vaguely towards the wall, a few drops of water splashing her face from a particularly stubborn leak in the awning. "It helps clear the mind before starting the afternoon preparations." "Fresh air?" David scoffed, pushing off the doorframe and taking a halting step closer, wincing slightly as his knee complained. "Maria, look at this. It's freezing and you're getting wet. There's a staff lounge with a fireplace, a perfectly good table in the scullery, a dozen places indoors that are warm and dry. What you're doing is ridiculous." He paused, looking pointedly at the small, cheap container she was hiding. He recognized the smell now. It was strong, spicy, and distinctly different from the delicate aroma of the trout he had eaten. It was the scent of plain, humble food. Beans, perhaps, and a strong stewed meat, the kind of nourishing, cost-effective meal a person cooked to last for days. He suddenly felt ridiculous in his cashmere sweater, standing next to her in the wet cold. "Please, just tell me. Why are you out here? You work hard. You deserve a proper dry meal." He lowered his voice, trying to convey genuine concern instead of accusation. Is there some kind of rule you think I have about where you eat? Because I assure you there is not. You are welcome to any of the back facilities, anytime." He made sure to emphasize the word welcome, hoping to break through the wall of professional deference she had built. Maria remained unyielding, her body language stiff with defensiveness. "Absolutely no, Mr. Miller. You are nothing but generous. The conditions here are 5-star. It is merely a personal preference of mine. I enjoy the solitude and the contrast with the busy kitchen. Please do not worry yourself. I will be inside in a moment to prepare your evening menu." She attempted a small, placating smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. But David had spent his life reading body language under stress, the subtle twitch of a muscle, the rapid blink, the slight tremor in the hand holding the plastic spoon. She was lying. Her eyes were clouded with a deep private sorrow that he had glimpsed once before in the faces of people who had just lost everything in a wildfire, a kind of quiet, desperate resignation. The emotional distance she usually maintained had suddenly become a physical barrier, one that he felt compelled to break down not out of managerial duty, but out of a sudden, deep sense of shared, inexplicable loneliness. He saw himself in her, exiled to a cold corner regardless of the warmth available just meters away. "Maria," he said, using her first name, something he rarely did, the familiarity cutting through the professional formality. "I insist, you either come inside, or I will stay here with you. Which of us do you think looks more foolish standing in the rain?" He gestured to the vast empty space behind him. "You're better than this. That food, it's not the food you prepare for me. I can smell it. It's personal, and you don't want me to see it or the container or this setup, is that it? Is this some ritual I don't understand?" He realized he sounded like he was talking to a stubborn child, but the need to understand the source of her palpable distress overruled his decorum. The simple act of eating lunch had become a silent, profound confession of some deep, unacknowledged misery, and the millionaire firefighter, accustomed to solving crises of a colossal scale, felt completely useless in the face of this quiet, personal act of self-imposed hardship. He simply couldn't leave her there alone. David's gentle insistence, and the sheer awkwardness of the situation, two people from dramatically different strata of life sharing an uncomfortable moment in the cold, wet garage entryway, finally fractured Maria's carefully constructed composure. Her shoulders slumped, shedding the stiffness of professional defense, and she let out a sigh that sounded less like annoyance and more like profound, weary defeat. The metal container, which she had been holding like a shield, finally settled back onto the plastic bin. The plastic spoon clattered lightly against the aluminum rim. It's not about the cold, Mr. Miller," she confessed, the volume of the rain seeming to momentarily muffle her voice, making her lean in slightly. "And it's certainly not about your generosity. You pay me better than anyone I have ever worked for. You treat me with dignity. It's exactly because of how much you provide that I can't eat the food inside." David frowned, confusion replacing his earlier concern. He took another, steadier step toward her, maneuvering his stiff leg carefully. "I don't understand, Maria. Are you saying you can't eat the food I buy? Is it a dietary restriction, an allergy? We can change the ingredients, you know that." He immediately started mentally compiling a list of potential menu adjustments, shifting into the familiar, problem-solving mode of an incident commander, trying to impose logic on the apparent absurdity of the situation. Maria shook her head slowly, her eyes still avoiding his, fixed instead on a pool of rainwater collecting near the downspout. "No, sir. It is the food that I eat. It is the food I brought from home. It is a simple home-cooked meal, the same kind of meal I've been eating for 20 years. Rice, lentils, a little stewed pork. It lasts me for 3 days." She paused, gathering her breath, and finally looked up, her dark eyes brimming with a depth of sadness that momentarily stunned David. "I cannot eat your food. I cannot eat the expensive trout, the fresh scallops, the artisan bread, or the imported fruit that is always in your kitchen." She gestured toward the massive lodge looming behind them, a monument to effortless consumption. "I cannot, in good conscience, take another bite of the plenty inside, because every penny I earn, every morsel of food I save, is a lifeline, and I need to be reminded of that every day, every meal, in a quiet, difficult way." The silence stretched, broken only by the downpour. David felt a sudden, sickening drop in his stomach, the same feeling he got when a forest fire unexpectedly jumped a massive, pre-cut firebreak. He was completely wrong. This wasn't stubbornness or a preference for the elements. This was penance. This was a deliberate act of self-imposed austerity, for a reason far deeper than a personal quirk. "A lifeline, Maria. What kind of lifeline? I pay you a high salary. Where is the necessity?" He spoke the word necessity carefully, almost tentatively, suddenly aware of the enormous chasm between his own experience of life and hers. The barrier was entirely gone now. The dam of her professional reserve had burst. Maria leaned her back against the damp stucco of the wall, the effort of concealment having finally drained her strength. She began to speak, her voice low and tight, a rapid, almost desperate outpouring of carefully guarded secrets. "I have 2 sons, Alejandro and Marco. They are 28 and 25. They both live back home in Mérida, Yucatan. They are good men, hardworking, but they fell into debt, a colossal debt. Alejandro borrowed from a loan shark for an investment that went catastrophically wrong, and Marco co-signed a predatory line of credit for his friend, who then disappeared." She swallowed hard, blinking back tears that finally threatened to fall, mirroring the rain. "The amount, Mr. Miller, is $37,000. That is a small number to you, a weekend's entertainment maybe. But to them it is a life sentence. The interest accrues so fast, it suffocates them," she continued, the words now tumbling out in an unstoppable rush, fueled by years of suppressed worry. "They send me photos of the threats, graffiti on the walls, a broken window, the constant ringing of the phone. I cannot ask them to risk their lives. I took this job because it pays $10,000 more a year than the best hotel in the city, and it provides a quiet, free place to live. Every single dollar you deposit into my account goes directly to them. I take out only $150 a month for myself, and if I eat the food here, even the leftovers, it is a meal I didn't save, a small amount of money I didn't send home. I eat my meal outside, alone in the silence and the difficulty, because it is the only way I can remind myself that I am not here for comfort. I am here for a purpose." She drew a shaky breath, her gaze imploring him to understand the simple, brutal logic of her sacrifice. "I am a mother, Mr. Miller. When your children are drowning, you don't stand on the shore and enjoy a feast. You jump in, no matter the weather, no matter the cost to yourself. David felt the revelation hit him like a physical blow. $37,000. The absurdity of the number in his world was staggering. It was the monthly payment on his ski cabin, the cost of a mediocre used vehicle, and yet this mountain of anxiety and poverty was driving this selfless, talented woman to eat cold beans in the rain, away from the warmth she had earned and was constantly maintaining for him. He imagined the scene: her sons terrified, besieged by debt collectors, and their mother 5,000 miles away, enduring a self-imposed exile, driven by a love so fierce it manifested as relentless self-denial. The weight of his own wealth, which felt so isolating, suddenly felt shameful. He had been drowning in his own self-pity over a sprained ligament and a cancelled climbing season, while a truly devastating human crisis was unfolding right under his own roof. He leaned against the cold metal door, his own legs momentarily forgotten, replaced by a surge of overwhelming emotion. He was a man who specialized in life-or-death rescues, yet he had completely missed the silent emergency happening right next to him. He was supposed to be the rich man, the one with power and perspective, and yet she was the one with the superior moral clarity. He suddenly saw his perfectly plated trout meal as an offense, his unused pool as an insult. "Maria," he managed, his voice now thick with unshed emotion. He pulled out his phone, his hand trembling slightly. "Stop, please. Don't move. Don't wipe your eyes." He was not patronizing her. He was giving himself a command. He opened his banking app, navigated the complex screens of his massive trust funds, and found the correct transfer module. "Tell me the name of the recipient," he instructed, his thumb hovering over the keypad. "The one in Merida, the account number." Maria's eyes widened in confusion, a flicker of panic mixed with disbelief. "Mr. Miller, no, I cannot accept a loan. You are my employer. I have my pride. I will work for it. I will pay it down." "It's not a loan," David stated firmly, his firefighter's command voice returning, cutting through her protests. "It's a debt I am going to pay. All of it. Now. You have worked in my home for 23 months, preparing 3 meals a day, 6 days a week, often for my extended family and guests, with professionalism and perfection. Your emotional labor alone, living away from your home and your fear, is worth more than I have paid you. I consider this a bonus, a severance payment from my shame." He extended the phone, his face earnest and solemn. "Tell me the name, Maria. Give me the account." He wasn't asking. He was demanding, not out of malice, but out of a sudden, visceral need to right this wrong, to stop the rain from falling on her soul. This act of giving was for her, yes, but profoundly, it was also for him, a way to cut a firebreak through the selfish isolation that had been consuming him since his accident. This was his rescue. Maria stood motionless beneath the dripping awning, the rain now a dull, steady roar, her breath catching in a silent, jagged gasp. The words, $37,000 paid, hung in the cold air, heavier than the rain clouds themselves. She stared at David's extended hand, clutching the large, expensive phone with the illuminated screen, the confirmation of the transfer glowing like an impossible miracle. She blinked rapidly, her mind struggling to reconcile the reality of the past 30 seconds with the crushing reality of the past 2 years. $37,000. The number that had haunted her sleep, poisoned her days, and forced her into this self-inflicted, painful exile, had just been extinguished by the casual press of a rich man's thumb. It was too fast, too simple, too monumental to be true. "Mr. Miller," she whispered, her voice cracking, I don't understand. Why? You owe me nothing but my salary. This is—" She couldn't complete the thought. It was an act of grace so enormous it felt like an act of violence against her own fierce independence, her carefully preserved pride in earning every dollar. She felt the tears now, hot and fast, not of sorrow, but of a dizzying, terrifying release. It was a physical reaction, a bodily revolt against the stress she had carried for so long. David lowered his hand slightly, his expression softening from command to a deep, genuine empathy. His own eyes were glistening, recognizing in her raw emotion the very liberation he had been searching for since his injury, the ability to be a rescuer again, even if the fire was an internal one. "It is not a debt I owe to you personally, Maria," he said, his voice quiet, resonating with a sudden, profound maturity. "It is a debt I owe to my own humanity. I have been sitting in this huge, empty house, feeling sorry for myself, because I can't climb a mountain for a few months. Meanwhile, you have been enduring this cold, silent torment, 5,000 miles from your family, all for a sum of money I spend annually on property taxes. The injustice of that equation is too much for me to bear. Consider it a necessary rebalancing. Consider it the cost of your peace." He took a final, difficult step forward and gently placed the phone in her hand, forcing her to grasp the cold metal. "The funds are cleared. Go inside, call your sons. Tell them it is over. Eat a warm meal at the kitchen table. And for God's sake, dry yourself off." Maria could no longer speak. The tears flowed freely, mixing with the rain on her face, but she felt no shame. Her hands, rough from years of chopping vegetables and scrubbing floors, gripped the phone, her fingers tracing the screen where the final transaction was confirmed. She sank slowly onto the plastic bin, abandoning her meager meal. The cold beans and rice were instantly forgotten, irrelevant. The floodgates opened and she wept, not with the dry, contained sorrow of a professional facing hardship, but with the full, racking sobs of a woman who had just been handed back her future. David stood silently beside her, placing a large, comforting hand on her shoulder. The millionaire firefighter, who had faced down 100-foot flames and sheer mountain drops without flinching, felt his heart breaking, and yet, paradoxically, knitting itself back together in the quiet presence of her overwhelming relief. He realized that this truly was what recovery meant, finding a purpose outside of his own survival. The days that followed were characterized by a quiet, revolutionary change in the atmosphere of the lodge. The rain eventually stopped, giving way to brilliant, crisp autumn days, but the emotional climate had fundamentally shifted. The first sign was the disappearance of the dented metal container. The second was Maria's demeanor. The professional wall she had erected remained, but it was now porous, allowing a soft warmth to permeate. Her smiles were genuine, reaching her eyes, which were now clear and bright, free of the shadow that had darkened them for so long. On the third day, David entered the kitchen just before noon and found Maria sitting at the large, reclaimed wood island, not the professional workspace, but the casual eating area with comfortable, upholstered stools. She was eating. She had prepared herself a small plate of the lodge's finest ingredients, a warm slice of fresh focaccia, some creamy avocado, and a small, delicate salad tossed in an herbal vinaigrette. It was simple, yet luxurious. She looked up, and instead of flinching, she offered a genuine, unhurried smile. "It is a beautiful day, Mr. Miller," she said. "The sun is strong." "It is, Maria," he agreed, getting himself a glass of water. "I trust the calls home were satisfactory." "Satisfactory does not cover it," she replied, a single glistening tear tracing a path down her cheek. "They are safe. They are working. The threats have stopped. My sons have a new beginning. They can breathe again." She paused, her voice trembling with emotion. "I will never be able to repay you, sir. Not in 1,000 lifetimes." "You already have," David insisted, leaning his good hip against the counter. "You have reminded me that money has a function beyond buying comfort. Its true worth is in buying freedom and peace. You taught me that my greatest wealth is not in the bank, but in the power to act. And for that, I am the one eternally in your debt." He looked down at his stiff leg, then back up at her radiant face. "I'm starting physical therapy twice a day next week. I'm pushing for a full recovery. Your resilience is a better motivation than any therapist." Over the next few weeks, the resolution solidified. Maria, now free of the urgent grinding need, decided to stay. She had made a commitment to David, and she honored it, but her job now felt different. It was no longer a cage of exile, but a platform of stability. She continued to send money home, but it was discretionary income, not survival funds. She began experimenting with her own traditional recipes, blending them with the lodge's high-end ingredients, producing dishes that were a profound and beautiful fusion of two worlds. She taught David, the simple-eating firefighter, how to make cochinita pibil, and explained the deep historical significance of the spices, turning meal preparation into moments of genuine, cultural connection. David's perspective transformed entirely. The lesson of that rainy day, that true abandonment is not physical solitude but emotional isolation, had resonated through his core. He started opening the lodge to local community events, hosting dinners for the mountain rescue volunteers, transforming the empty mansion into a hub of warmth and collective purpose. He saw Maria not as his employee, but as his friend, his moral compass, and a fellow survivor of a different kind of disaster. One evening, as the first snow of the season dusted the peaks, David watched Maria happily video calling her sons from the warmth of the living room, describing the way the snow looked on the spruce trees. She wasn't hiding. She was present. The sound of her laughter, rich and unconstrained, filled the high-ceilinged room. He realized the true nature of the story. It wasn't about a millionaire helping a cook. It was about two people, both wealthy in different ways, one in resources, one in character, who found each other in a moment of crisis and, through an act of selfless exchange, saved each other from their respective forms of brokenness. The fire was out, the rain had stopped, and a new, stronger foundation of hope and forgiveness had been laid. We hope this powerful story of compassion, sacrifice, and a surprising new beginning touched your heart. If you believe in the transformative power of kindness and the possibility of overcoming immense hardship, we invite you to join our growing family here at Emoções Reais. Hit that subscribe button and make yourself at home. We promise to always share stories that illuminate the best parts of the human spirit. And now for our community. We're curious to know where our stories are finding you tonight. Tell us in the comments which city and state you are watching this video from. Did you enjoy this emotional journey? And more importantly, what single most important life lesson did you take away from David and Maria's unexpected encounter? Let us know below.